So welcome to part 2 of part 4. This is going to become a bit of a lengthy one because drums, they are very tricky. And I have quite a lot to say about them. But I will try to be as precise as I can be because I don't want to overload you with any information. I told you in the last one that the drums, they do serve a very particular role, a special role in music. And they are, I think you can consider them more of a supporting instrument, at least more so than other instruments are. And because I also mentioned that they should complement the energy of the music. And what they also can do, or what they also are used for very often, is they can signify the changes in the music. So they can prepare the listeners for what is going to happen next. I want to start this part by showing you some drum beats that I have prepared. And I've chosen another very basic kit. It's called the C78. It's called after some kind of drum machine, an analog drum machine. And I guess you should have something that sounds quite similar to this. So this is not specific to Ableton, but you should have something that's quite similar to this in your audio workstation. But you can choose whatever you like, basically. Let's listen to this one. You will definitely have heard this. This is, let's say, the classic backbeat to a lot of Western songs. Take a listen. Yeah, it's very, very, very stereotypical for Western music, especially rock music. It has the bass drum go on the 1 and the 3, and the snare go on the 2 and the 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And why this beat works is you have the essential 3 components, which are the hi-hat up here, the snare down here, and the bass drum at the bottom. And why this beat works is the bass drum it lays the foundation of the groove. It makes you bob your head up and down to the beat. So this is 1, 2, 3, 4. And this feeling of 1, 2, 3, 4 is established by our bass drum. The low sound kind of pulls you down and makes you bob your head. And you have to have this kind of beat established for your groove to make sense. Because any rhythm only makes sense if it is composed against some underlying beat. And in this case, the bass drum provides this beat for us. And the snare, on the other hand, what the snare does is it provides a contrast to this bass drum. It's a very sharp, a very bright sound. So it creates a kind of a back and forth between the bass drum and the snare, so that it feels like the piece is moving along. It's a bit of the driver of this entire beat. So it feels like it's going somewhere. And what we have next is the third very essential component. It's the hi-hat. And the hi-hat is a very minimalistic sound. A short and clicky sound that should not get too much attention. But what the hi-hat really does, it's kind of the glue to all of this. It kind of tells you, okay, we composed this in an 8th note groove because the hi-hat is playing 8th notes. So we know, okay, it glues all of this together into an 8th note groove. Because if you look closely, actually, what's happening down here, they are all composed on quarter notes. But we know that this is an 8th note groove because we have this gluey element here. This very subtle element in the background that tells us, no, this is not a quarter note groove, this is an 8th note groove. An 8th note groove will feel distinct to a quarter note groove because it will feel a little bit more energetic, a little bit faster. And that's why it's important to say, okay, let's have this subtle element that can tell the listener, okay, this is what you're listening to. Because you can also do like this. You can say, let's not compose this on 8, but let's say we're just going to do quarter note. And this is going to sound very different, even though this doesn't change at all. It feels a little bit more drawn back, a little slower. Compared to this one. And all of this is achieved by this very subtle component. And what we can now do is actually listen back to some of these groups to some of these grooves with the music that we have already composed. So let me show you how they sound. And here I want to highlight the problem that I've hinted towards in the previous episode, which is that many different grooves will fit over the same song. So, I think that's where a lot of the difficulty lies. But let me show you first, and then we'll talk about this later. So, first groove with our song. Sounds perfectly fine to me. Then the next one. It might not fit as well, but it still sounds perfectly fine. If that's what you're going for, why not? Next one. Again, fits. It's not doing something crazy, but it's following the beat. Next one. A little bit more sophisticated one. Same as the ones before. It sounds good to me. And, this one does as well. So I really think this is where a lot of the problems come when composing drums, because as long as you follow this beat, things are a lot of the times gonna sound okay. And I think the real difficulties come from deciding, okay, all of these sound good, but which one sounds the best? And if you're inexperienced, it can be quite tough. It can be quite overwhelming to have all of these options. But yeah, I think we can do better than any of these by trying to compose something that's really tailored towards the music. Because as I said, drums, they should support the music. And therefore, I think they should also be tailored or targeted specifically for the music you're writing for. So how we want to start is by, again, listening to the music first, but we want to listen with intention. We want to identify some essential hits in our music that we feel like they kind of make up the melody the most. So if we listen to this, we have like some hits that feel like they have a lot more emphasis than others. So for me, it would be, for example, this F here. The C, of course, is the first beat. Then the G again. So here it feels like there is a lot of energy that's accumulating. So these are the hits that you don't want to miss in your drum part. These are the hits that you want to accentuate. So what we can do is, when we have identified these hits, or the hits that you want to accentuate, you go down to your bass drum and you put in exactly those hits, because this one is on the 2 and. So once you play back, you feel like the bass drum, it gives these hits a little bit more meaning, a little bit more emphasis. And then this one again. Maybe this one in the bass and the chords. Then maybe here. Then again here. So we have this one. And there's no formula to this. It's just use your ears, try to identify these essential hits, and try to put them in with your bass drum first. Music is a soft science. There's no singular rule that will lead to the perfect outcome. It's just you have to use your ears and identify these hits, and try to emphasize them. And if we copy them here, let's see how they line up with this. Maybe this one doesn't fit well. Bum, bum. No. Okay. This would be your first step. Identifying the hits, and marking them with your bass drum. Okay, now we can come to the snare. And as the snare is such a harsh and a bright sound, I think there's a lot of damage that can be done with the snare if you don't know what you do. So I think it's best for most beats, it will sound very good if you just put it on the 2 and the 4 of each bar. And then you can still decide if you like what you hear, but most definitely you will like what you hear. And then at some points you see, okay, the bass drum and the snare, they line up, and it's up to you if you choose to make this hit be accentuated by the snare or make it both the snare and the bass drum. But I usually like to trade this beat from the bass with the snare and say, okay, I'll just deactivate those. I think it sounds nicer. But yeah, if we do the same for this one here, I'm sure it's gonna sound pretty good. Let's deactivate those and then we can have another listen. Okay, so does sound pretty good to me. Now we can come to the hi-hat. And as I told you, the hi-hat is a rather minimal, or is an element that shouldn't get too much attention, but it establishes the feel of the groove. So for us, what we're gonna do is we're simply gonna do a simple 8-note groove, just all the way through, and have an 8th note feel for this section here. And I know you're wondering, why the hell did we do this in the previous episode? But this is really, I think once the hi-hat is coming into play, I think this is really the part of the composition where this will make a lot of sense. Because the hi-hat, as I said, establishes the feel, and the feel establishes the energy. And I told you as well that this 8th note feel will feel a little bit more speedier, a little bit more energetic. So what we can do to decrease the energy is, let's say we're not gonna go from an 8th note, but we're gonna go to a quarter note groove, and we'll sound like this, right? So put in the quarter notes, and all of a sudden when we listen back to this, we even though this one does not change at all, we will feel a sudden decrease in energy. Can you hear it? It's very drastic. This particular example is very drastic. So now we can take a look at what we have written above here. and it says it should increase again because it's gonna lead to this release. So the increase should basically it builds up a lot of momentum for the release to feel all the more satisfying. So the most basic thing we can do is change this back to our eighth notes, and then have this release happen right here. And probably the release could be good to have a symbol here, because the symbol is a very drawn out sound, and it kind of symbolizes this release of the built up energy that we have here. So I hope you can feel how this kind of builds up to this point of where all the tension all of a sudden releases. Maybe even this. We have written pick up because after this release we're gonna have to, this is a loop, don't remember, so we're gonna have to match or come back to this mid energy again. So we need some point where the drums are gonna pick up again after the release, and I think this is probably also better, like let's say mid energy, because it feels like here it should already feel like it's matching this energy again. So the pickup happens here, and by this point we want to have same energy as right here. Okay, so again, let's say pickup is we want to go from no hi-hat to quarter notes, and then we go back to the eighth notes once again. Okay, so let's listen. And then it loops back around pretty nicely, because we have again established this eighth note groove again, and then it leads back nicely to the beginning of our loop. So right now I think we have done pretty good at matching the energy of the piece, but remember that all of these changes, they are very, very sudden for now. So we simply go directly from this eighth note, we go directly to the quarter notes. But what we can do is we can also prepare the listener for this change. And prepare, like the preparation phase, obviously it has to come before the change. So the change happens on the one here. So we have to take a look at what's happening before this. So if we just simply take out one note and make this a quarter note, it will automatically feel like transition here will feel so much more pleasing, so much more expected to the listener, because we have prepared them by this simple change. See, already it doesn't feel as jarring anymore. And the same you can do with, let's say, this one. You have we get directly into the eighth note groove again. But what we can do is actually, we can split this note into a 16th note, into an eighth note, and all of a sudden, just by preparing something before the change happens, we can make the listener feel so much more at ease with this change. You can even start a little bit earlier than this by changing this one as well. Okay, and the exact same thing is going on here. There is this release, I prepare for that release, and just put a quarter note here. Okay, but changing the hi-hat pattern is not the only way you can switch up the music or signify a change. What you can also do is, you have this established snare pattern that goes always on the 2 and the 4 throughout the entire song. And to prepare the listener, you can also say, okay, let's break up this pattern and say, put the snare before the drum, before the bass drum. And all of a sudden the listener will know, okay, something is about to happen. Or just put a cymbal here, for example. So, you know, a change usually is prepared by changing something that has been established beforehand. Okay, so this makes it way easier for the listener to know what's going to happen next, or to prepare for what's going to happen next. Okay, seeing that things have gone on for quite a long now, I think I'm gonna make some changes off camera and come back to you once I have the finished groove, and then I will tell you exactly what I have changed. I think that's the easier way to do this, because otherwise we're gonna be here for a little while longer. Okay, so I'm back now with the finished groove, and I've most of the changes actually happened in the second part. The first part remained largely untouched, but in this, what I've done is I have made the decrease in energy more drastic, because I have left out the hi-hats completely for a while, only for them to pick up again in a quarter note groove, and then go back to the eighth note for the final release. And I've also delayed the pickup here a little bit, because I think before I have done this, where the eighth note groove will pick up here at the 4 of the third bar, but I've also delayed this just a little bit. I have introduced some eighth notes in the bass to make it a little bit more subtle, and this is what it sounds like. You know, this might be a little bit of a more advanced groove, but all in all, what I've simply used basically the techniques that I have shown you and made them maybe a little bit more fancy than just sticking to the hi-hat. But yeah, I totally get it if you want to settle with something a bit more simple than what I have done, because a lot of this also comes down to my experience in composing drums. So for you, it would be totally fine if you just simply stick to the things that I have told you before, and simply do a little bit of changing in the hi-hats, do a little bit of swapping around in the snare drum, have a cymbal here and there. So I would totally get it, but I think this is very achievable even for you if you simply have a little bit of practice. Okay, so by now I really want to wrap this part up. It has gone on for quite a long time now, but there would still be so much more that you can do with the drums, because we have only focused on basically the hi-hat, the snare, and the kick, and we have all these other sounds that still could basically become a main part of our groove. But you know, I want to keep this beginner friendly, but just to show you what I mean is we have made sure that we catch these essential hits, basically the ones that we have identified in our melody. But then again, we see, okay, our melody, it leaves quite enough room in this section, so our melody is very drawn out. So what we could do, if we want, is say we can go really crazy with the drums here, because we have made sure we catch those hits, and now I don't know, it's just we even go with 16th notes, and it will sound pretty okay. It will actually sound, I think, quite nice if we just do something like this. You know, it's up to, I guess, the person that that composes the song, but you know, there's no hits here. There's nothing that we can mess up by putting in these notes. If you get what I'm trying to say. So what we can actually do is, I don't know, just do something fast, crazy. And it will sound good because at these parts, there really is nothing that we have to acknowledge in the melody. So take a listen. I mean, it might clash a little bit here, but you get the idea. As long as you have made sure that those hits in the melody that they are taken care of, you can go pretty crazy with what happens between those hits. But yeah, I think that's the final piece of advice that I have for you. It really is a difficult topic because it has so much different routes that you can go down. But I hope you still have learned something. And just, make sure that you understand that this is not the only way that you can write your drums. This is just one way that you can think of them, because, they are so versatile and you can do so much with them. And I think this is best highlighted by this part, I think, being twice, if not 3 times as long as the other ones. And I've made a huge cut in the middle. So, keep that in mind and simply lay a good foundation and then try around, do something crazy like the cowbell here and see what it sounds like. Okay, but that's it for this part. The next part will probably not be as long. I hope so, at least. But see you there, hopefully. Bye-bye.